Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 15th of July, 2016, just after 1 o'clock, and welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. And we will be joined by live video Skype link by David Scott from Northern Exposure, who is going to be digging very deep into what's really happening with so-called child protection north of the border. Well, the weather is not too good. It's pretty grey here in Plymouth, grey and overcast, so we're not going to dwell on that. And really we shouldn't, because things are becoming very, very serious indeed in the UK. And of course, we've now got Theresa May installed as Prime Minister. What can we expect, Mike? Breakup of the UK?
Breakup of the UK, this is something we've been talking about for a long time. This is a new poll from the BBC and Comres. This is the Independent talking about it here. 53% of Britons believe the union will break up in the next decade. And of course, this isn't just about Brexit. The poll is mainly about Brexit. This is people's view following the Brexit vote. But the point that we've been making at the UK column is that this is not just about Brexit. This is about the broader devolution, constitutional reform agenda, which has been taking place really, well, since 1911, but particularly since the coalition government in 2010, and when Nick Clegg was put in position of constitutional reformer extraordinaire. He brought in the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, but since then we've seen various attacks on institutions, not least the whole devolution agenda, and now city states and city regions and unitary authorities in non-city regions. So the breakup of the union is absolutely on the cards, and the fact that Theresa May is saying that she is for the union, well, this is tantamount to David Cameron saying, one United Kingdom. It's nothing of the kind. They are breaking it up.
They're breaking it up, and what we've got is a massive propaganda exercise in the press and the media in order now to start people accepting that there's so much turbulence in UK that the United Kingdom is going to break up. It cannot be just a coincidence that the finance minister of Austria, who spoke out recently, said, well, I think that Scotland will aim to stay in the Union, Northern Ireland will stay with the Union, but what you're going to see is Britain become Little Britain. And of course, we've had the appointment of Boris Johnson as the ambassador for Britain. I mean, what a statement this is, that we have a cartoon character who's now representing the British state. Is that an accident, Mike? Do you think? I don't think so. So just remember that Boris Johnson is another man who says that Zionism is his lead interest. So is he working for the British? I don't think so, but more on that another time.
Now, just before we get on to more serious subjects, Brian, a couple of people asked about the pen you were using yesterday, which of course is leopard print.
Right.
So I just wanted to point out that this was really because Theresa May, who loves leopard print shoes so much, is the new Prime Minister. We were using a leopard print pen yesterday. That was the reason for that.
It's now been taken away from me.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we better just pop or nip north of the border, I should say, because of course dialogue has already started.
Well, yes, it has, but in a different way from under the previous administration. There was always a tendency for David Cameron, despite his Scottish roots, to defer very much to Nicola Sturgeon and the Scottish government. I think he felt his Etonian accent and general style played very badly in Scotland, and he tended to avoid any politicking here. And what we've got with Theresa May is in fact quite the reverse. Her first words on becoming Prime Minister were about preserving the Union, and her first act is to come to Edinburgh to meet Nippy. So I think we're going to have quite a different style. Whether that results in more conflict, I'm not sure, but I suspect it will, because conflict is in the interest of the nationalists. So we're going to see, I think, the Scottish question coming very much to the fore.
Yeah, David, my brain says to me that what we've got here is another classic psyop. We were right over the Brexit psyop, and I'm going to say we're going to be right over this one. So you can't have politicians in Westminster actually showing their hand that they're really working to break up the union. They've got to give a front that they're helping to preserve it. But we've seen time and time again that when Westminster MPs say one thing, the policy is really the exact opposite, 180 degrees out. So I think you're going to see Theresa May continually waving a flag saying she's here to help protect the union, but what she'll be doing in the dark behind closed doors with Nippy will be everything possible to create big trouble.
So she's waving a flag. That'll be a false flag, would it?
It will be, certainly.
Yes. Well, so let's talk about what's going on in France at the moment. The terror massacre in Nice, as the Express calls it here. Lorry driver terrorist has been named. He is, of course, has a Middle Eastern name. The Daily Mail here saying weapons found inside bullet-riddled truck spark fears Nice massacre could have been even more deadly. So we have an alleged terrorist who has driven a truck through people, and he has given away his terrorist cash in the process. This doesn't seem like a plausible narrative to me.
I just find this another extraordinary set of events, Mike, and I think patience is going to be the thing with this, because my prediction is more and more interesting facts are going to emerge.
Right. Well, the one thing that that sort of jumped out at me, this is a horrible image, is that the name of the street, which is Promenade des Anglais, so the Walk of the English. So was this street chosen because of Brexit?
It's an interesting question.
Interesting question. Well, let's look at the French reaction to it, because this is what we've got to keep an eye on. The French Prime Minister Manuel Valls has said that France has to learn to live with terrorism, and my question is why? But he says they have to learn to live with terrorism. Francois Hollande said, "Nothing will make us yield in our will to fight terrorism. We will further strengthen our actions in Iraq and Syria." So potentially we're going to be bombing Syria again. We will continue striking those who attack us on our own soil. Of course, this attack, there's no evidence that this had anything to do with Iraq or Syria. But what Hollande has immediately done is to extend the state of emergency, suspend the French constitution. Now this keeps getting extended, and it looks like the state of emergency will be in position in France forever at the rate we're going. But the real development of the day is that he has called up 10,000 military reservists to take over on the streets, because he says that the police are just extremely tired following all the various previous so-called terror attacks in France, and also the Euro 2016 championships and all the policing duties that they've had to cover over the last few months. So they now need the military on the streets in order to bolster the police efforts. And I would just remind everybody about the conference of the European Defence Agency last November, where they were describing how there would be a merger of police and military over the next period, and this seems to be the first sign of it, all off the back of what is being called a terrorist incident, but there is no evidence that this man was in any way connected with any kind of terrorist groups. What was Theresa May's reaction to this? If, as we fear, this was a terrorist attack, then we must redouble our efforts to defeat these brutal murderers who want to destroy our way of life. We must work with France and our partners around the world to stand up for our values and for our freedom. And Brian, I just wanted to ask what our values, what is our values, and whose freedom is she talking about? Because everything that I see is designed to cut down on the freedom of individuals.
Well, absolutely. But just before I answer that point, Micah, the key thing there is she's saying we work with France. So what this is doing is reinforcing what we've seen Cameron doing, and Michael Fallon in defence saying, well, don't worry about Brexit. Brexit will do what it does. It'll happen. It'll be delayed. It'll go on forever. but we are going to stay locked in with the French in a military sense, with equipment, with operations and future procurement. And now we've got this happening down to the police level. So we've got something very, very sinister building. We're locked into a military arrangement with France for 50 years. That was David Cameron's backdoor plan. And now, of course, France is a military dictatorship, very close to it. And we're seeing Theresa May saying, oh, well, we're going to have to continue working with that organisation. Notice she doesn't mention the EU anymore. Now it's France who is our partner. So this is very, very sinister propaganda. And the business about standing up for the values, this is a criminal elite, Mike. We've got a criminal elite installed in Westminster. Of course, they're only the puppets. The real powerhouse is through the City of London. And I think this is becoming more and more clear.
Well, before I ask David for a comment, I would just say have a look at 21stcenturywire.com. Patrick and Vanessa have a couple of articles on this up already. One of the things that Patrick has highlighted is the fact that that there have been a number of drills for this type of event in the last couple of months. And in fact, one of the French police senior policeman was discussing the possibility of an upcoming terrorist attack using trucks, and that was a month or two ago that he was saying
just
this.
A coincidence.
Just a coincidence. David, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, one of the things, obviously, speaking from Scotland, that reminds us of is the bin lorry tragedy in Glasgow a couple of Christmases ago, where someone ploughed into a crowd of shoppers, having apparently become unwell, and he was ultimately not charged with any crime. There was no case to answer in the opinion of the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service. Now, nobody riddled the cab and his body with bullets. No one suggested or leapt to the assumption that he was a terrorist. Everyone leapt to the assumption that it was an accident. So it'd be interesting to know exactly on what basis this decision was made, that this is clearly one thing and not the other. Now there may be valid reasons for making that call. There may not be. And in general, as we look at the narrative we're getting here, it's very strange, because we're fighting not an enemy, we're fighting a tactic. Terrorism is a tactic. And we are defending our values, but we can't name those values. We can no longer describe them. We are in a position where it's not politically correct to talk about British values anymore, and yet we're being asked to defend them and to give up our liberties in order to preserve them. It's a very strange situation.
Strange and dangerous.
Okay, one of the main topics of the news today is going to be children and child-related issues. We'll start off with Andrea Leadsom here, of course, erstwhile leadership candidate for the Conservative Party, and she was speaking to the Times and creating what is probably going to be quite a bit more controversy here. The Times saying that Andrea Leadsom saying that as an employer, we're not, let's face it, most of us don't employ men as nannies. Most of us don't. Now, you can call that sexist. I call that cautious and very sensible. When you look at the stats, your odds are stacked against you if you employ a man. We know paedophiles are attracted to working with children. I'm sorry, but they are the facts. So Andrea Leadsom absolutely putting the issue of paedophilia at the door of men exclusively.
Which, of course, is totally incorrect, because the statistics say it pans out roughly 50-50, 52% men, 48% women, something like this. And this is a statistic that nobody wants to talk about. So are your children safer with women? No, they're not.
No. And in fact, some of the high-profile cases in the courts in recent years have been with female school teachers, for example. And let's not forget who it was in the 1970s, 70s, wasn't it, who was supporting the paedophile information exchange and so on, a couple of female Labour MPs.
MPs, absolutely. So spin here, and of course, what is this also doing? It's driving the wedge into the male-female relationship, which is one of the things we've been talking about. But just to emphasise a point here, people are watching what's happening in France. They're watching what's happening overseas with the constant rhetoric that the great enemy is Russia. What we are going to continue to say is that at the moment, our children, north or south of the border or in Ireland, our children are the target of our own state. And unless we can protect our children within this generation, we don't have a future, because the state wants our children and is going to do everything possible to get it. So in this next section, where we're going to follow through really on what's happened to the Docherty family, but David Scott is going to show some of the really tremendous analysis that he's carried out, having a look at what the state has got in store for all of us. So let's just remind ourselves of Dochertys and have a look at the network around them. Now remember, this couple have not been accused of anything. They have not been accused of any crime. They've not been accused of neglecting or harming their children, but they've had all 4 children taken away, and there has been an utter silence by the state in Scotland, England, and in Ireland as to what's actually happened. So, of course, Police Scotland involved, in as much as their police turn up and carry out no investigation at all. We've got social services, social work north of the border in Scotland. They were immediately used to turn not on the potential child abuser, but on the Dochertys themselves. And on it goes, because, of course, the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, she's not interested in protection of children, and she certainly hasn't jumped in to help the Dochertys, and we'll see a bit more on that in a minute. So who else can we bring in? Well, we can bring in the head of the Garda in Ireland, because the Irish police have been used to take those children away and intimidate the family. They, of course, have worked with family services in Ireland, so that's all pretty usual. The National Crime Agency, well, you would think that if there's a crime or a potential crime with the abuse of children, they would be a first port of call. No, they're not interested in this particular case. And on it goes. So the English police, Met Police, they are not interested. Of course, none of the politicians interested in the slightest in this case. Charity's not interested, but a little bit later we can point a finger at Bernardo's in particular, because of course they're linked into social services themselves. And so we'll add a couple of key people, because Theresa May, formerly as Home Secretary, not interested in the Docherty case. And of course none of the churches, so be it the Church of England or the Catholic Church in Ireland, absolutely no interested in what's happening. So a wall of silence, and that could only really happen with the agreement of the courts who've been involved in this. So, David, we've got some very interesting audio clips to reinforce this, but just give us your opinions on this wall of silence. What is it about this case that the state is terrified of?
That's an excellent question, Brian. The degree of fear that is shown by many of the state functionaries here is really quite palpable. Rather than the usual delay and stonewalling, very often we're getting very quick responses that say, there's nothing to see here, please go away. We're getting no help, we're getting no answers to questions. The only person on that wall who maybe came out with some credit was, believe it or not, Theresa May, who, when the Dochertys appealed to her, was willing apparently to take some action, but because it was a devolved matter, it went to the Scottish government, and they were given sort of first refusal to deal with the matter, and they said, no, it's devolved, we will deal with it, and their definition of dealing with it was to do absolutely nothing to help, and perhaps a great deal to harm the Dochertys. So I think this one, first and foremost, has to be placed at the door Nicola Sturgeon.
David, I'm just going to say I personally wouldn't like to let Theresa May off so lightly, because we hear this excuse from our politicians time and time again. Oh, it's somebody else's responsibility. It's in another constituency. So constant excuses as to why they can't follow up on criminal activity. So I'm going to say, just from me in the UK column studio, Theresa May, you don't get off that lightly. But you've made some excellent calls, just asking simple questions of the authorities. And I know you were keen to let our listeners and viewers understand the type of wall of silence that you get. This first one, I believe, is a conversation between you and the police.
Yes, this is police media. This is the department under police in Aberdeen, who are dedicated to providing information to the media. So it'll be interesting for viewers and listeners to see just what that means in practice. Now, the background to this is that we asked 3 questions. We asked, is Alan Lowe, the Alan Lowe that was reported, a former police officer? Did he actually serve at Fraserburgh Police Station and Peterhead Police Station? We got an incoherent, unintelligible reply that said there's no substance to these claims. We made no claims, we pointed this out, and we asked for a written response to the questions. I was told we would get one. With nothing arrived, I phoned again, I was told again that there would be a written response. Nothing arrived, I phoned again, and this is the tape that you're about to hear.
Media, Kate speaking.
Hello, Kate. Is Kathleen available at all?
Who, sorry?
Is it Kathleen, one of your colleagues?
No, got a Catherine.
Catherine, must have been Catherine, yes. Is she available?
No, she's working away from Aberdeen. Can I help take a message?
Maybe you can help. I've been on to you several times, been promised an email response 3 times, and nothing so far has appeared. It's regarding the case of Brian and Janice Docherty. I was asking some questions about that, and I was told I would get a response in writing, but
no, you
nothing.
had a response. I've seen it. That's all we have to say on the matter. So there's not really anything else we can provide you.
No, that wasn't a response.
That's the response that we can give you.
That can't be the response.
Why not?
Because it doesn't make any sense. It's unintelligible. The only response I've had in writing was unintelligible.
Why was it unintelligible? What don't you understand about it?
It made no sense.
No, but I'm asking what you don't understand.
It's not a matter of understanding. It made no sense.
What's your name again, sorry?
David Scott.
Sorry?
David Scott.
What would your email address be?
David@alexanderscott.co.uk is probably the one that one came in on. I asked some questions, and the response I got said there's no substance to the claims made. There were no claims made. Made no sense.
Well, the claims, I think, are the questions that you've answered. Sorry, the questions that you've posed.
No, those were questions. Those were not claims. Those were simple questions.
Well, there's no substance to the questions then.
That doesn't make any sense.
I know she's emailed you back after that. Let me find it.
No, I didn't get an email after that. I was promised one 3 times. Nothing's appeared.
Okay. Well, leave it with me. She's not in the office, as I say, today, and she's off tomorrow, so it will be a few days until if there is any further response. But
this is the 4th leave it with me I've had from your office.
And you've been advised a number of times that there's nothing further that we can add, so I have to see what else that she has, because obviously I've not been dealing with this, but you have been advised a number of times. I've heard the conversations that there's nothing further that we can add.
I haven't, because there's no answers to these questions. They're simple questions.
I've heard the conversations on the phone that you've been told there's nothing we can add. So, as I say, I will have to speak with her when she's back in the office, and if there is anything further, we will get back to you.
Okay, I've not been told there's nothing further you can add. I've been told I will get a response in writing. That's what I've been told.
I'll check that with my colleagues, but as I say, she's not here.
So, I would like a response in writing, as I was promised.
Okay, well,
through the
if
questions.
there's anything further we can add to what you've already had.
Well, that would be good. Thank you very much.
All right, bye-bye.
Well, David, what a classic piece of fob off is the right expression. As some of our commentators are saying at the moment that basically this lady, obviously very well briefed, she knows full well about the case, but this is a case that the Scottish police, the Scottish government simply doesn't want to talk about.
They do not. Now, the question, ultimately, the question I was asking there is Alan Lowe a former police officer? If the answer is no, then that is presumably quite an easy one for Police Scotland to answer. They still refuse. I'm still waiting on a response. I'm still waiting on that email. I might wait for a while.
Right.
But David, if they don't want to say no, then the answer must be yes.
One would be toiling to find another possible answer. And as you know, Mike, we've got very good evidence backing up that question that's prompted us to ask that question. And we would have to conclude that if there's no formal written denial, then the answer really must be yes.
Isn't it... Sorry, I'll just interject there, David, if I may. Isn't it sad that media teams are now used as professionals to help lie for the state, to cover up for the state? So instead of their job being to actually serve the public and make sure that the truth is given to the public, every department, whether it's Theresa May as Prime Minister or the Cabinet Office, wherever it is, we've got these teams of these very insidious people who simply do as they're told in order to hide the truth.
And the implications here are very serious, because that would mean that there was a previous relationship between the investigating officer and the accused. That would mean that has been concealed from the Dochertys. They'd no idea it was the UK column that found this information out. That would mean it's been withheld from all of the investigating authorities, police review committees, and everything else that the state is meant to be employing to make sure that they do not infringe people's rights and the interests of justice.
Right. Okay, and we've got this gentleman, Luke Boddice. We've got audio to go with this in just a second, but who's this man, and how have you dealt with him?
Well, this is a PR consultant and communications officer working for Nicola Sturgeon's private office. Now, I contacted Nicola Sturgeon and asked essentially one question, which was what has Nicola done to assist the Dochertys? What is she doing, and what does she intend to do? So a 3-point question, and the response we got back was that. The Scottish Government is unable to comment on individual cases. The appropriate place to take this inquiry is Police Scotland. So it's Scottish Office answer number 1, which is go to a different department. And that was it. You know, that was the official line from the government spokesman. So I asked a few supplementary questions by email to try and get a little bit more from this department and from Mr. Boddice, and those email questions received no reply either. So I then phoned the gentleman. He's quite a young chap. He graduated 2007 from St Andrews University with a MA in medieval history. So that will come in handy in the New Scotland. Presumably because we're all going to be serfs, but I'm sure it will be handy, and I'm sure he's a very nice gentleman. But the phone call was interesting.
Hello, comms.
Hello. Can I speak to Luke Boddice, please?
Speaking.
Hello, Mr. Boddice. David Scott here. How are you today?
I'm not bad. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. How can I help? I've seen your emails. How can I help?
Yes. Well, I was wondering if we could. I wanted just to get a handle for where you're at with this, and whether anything further might be forthcoming.
We gave you the lines earlier on, and we're sticking with those lines on this issue.
Okay. What do you know about the case?
As I said, I'm sticking with the lines we issued, and that's as far as I'm going.
Okay. What do you know about the case? How much do you understand about the case?
As I said, I've given you the lines we're giving, so we're sticking with those lines.
Yeah, that's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you what, do you actually know the background to this? Do you know what the situation is that actually is in existence here that you're facing?
I've seen the emails you sent over, and I'm sticking with the lines that we issued earlier on to you.
Okay. Right. Okay. So, are you aware, for example, that the gentleman, Mr. Docherty, is in fact a former senior history teacher and a Conservative candidate for Holyrood?
As I said, I've given you the lines, and we're sticking with those lines.
Okay. Can you comment on the situation that I raised where the First Minister was able to intervene in another case, but not in this one? And I was asking where.
I'm sticking with the lines, Mr. Scott, we issued with you earlier.
Okay. But is that not a reasonable question? If the First Minister is able to intervene in one case and not this one, how is that defined?
We are sticking with the lines we've issued you.
Okay.
And if that's everything, then, as I said, that we're sticking with those lines.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye, sir. Bye for now.
Well, David, just quite remarkable. What's being said there? Well, the state is saying to the public, go away, you horrible people. We have our line. We're not interested in the truth. We're not interested in getting to the bottom of why 4 children have been taken away from them. Mum and dad, who are completely innocent of anything untoward towards those children. On complete opposite, they've attempted to report potential abuse of children, and the state simply does not want to talk about it. They're prepared to spin lines. This is very, very dangerous stuff. One of the things that we're trying to get across to people at the moment is that while they're busy watching the rhetoric against Russia, what we've got is a vicious dictatorship, complete with the propaganda, installing itself in Scotland and England. Did you get any further information, or have you had any further information since that remarkable exchange?
Not a single tweet. That was the Scottish Government, Nicola Sturgeon's idea of a communications officer. There wasn't a lot of communication going on, but what you could clearly see is there's a desperation to prevent any discussion of the Docherty case whatsoever.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's take people through a bit more of this remarkable case. And one of the things that you pointed out is that there was a family called the Brains family, who a huge amount of attention has been given to them because they're fighting deportation. So they're an Australian family. They've got a child who speaks Gaelic. But this is some of the stuff that's happened. There's been appeals made for this family in Holyrood and Westminster. The Home Office has given a bit of ground and granted leave for them to remain in Scotland until the 1st of August 2016. Their local MP, Mr. Ian Blackford, has been fighting the case. They've had a personal meeting with Nicola Sturgeon, and there's been major articles in the press, and we're looking at the one, of course, from The Guardian. Now, you raised a number of really excellent points over this. How is it that Nicola Sturgeon is happy to work with the Australian family, but not the Dochertys? Is the problem that she's not able to help if it's child abuse? Is it simply she can't help the Scots, but if you're from another country, she can help? Is it that she can't help unless your children speak Gaelic? Or is it this due to a battle between Westminster and Holyrood? And can she only help cases that are actually reported in the press? What is going on here?
Well, quite. And of course, I got no answers to any of this. Here you see the SNP were taking the Brains case to Westminster twice, including on the final PMQs when David Cameron was resigning. So this is extremely high profile. prime spot for anything that you consider important in this single family, this single individual case, was deemed worthy of that level of intervention in a single case by the SNP administration. And yet when we ask about the Dochertys, we're told we're unable to intervene in a single case. It would be inappropriate, therefore no discussion. It's completely inconsistent and it's completely hypocritical.
Okay, well, we just forced this issue home. We're saying no press coverage at all for the Docherty family. It's almost like standard journalists are scared of the case. But BBC here, this is talking out for the Brain family, so they're very happy with that. We've got questions being asked in Parliament, and when George Osborne doesn't produce the right response, the Independent here is saying shameful and disgusting response to 7-year-old boy who faces deportation. But when we're talking about Scottish families having 4 children taken from them with no grounds for that action, then we don't report anything in Britain's mainstream press. And of course, the smirking face of David Cameron, just perfect. He can leave his daughter at a pub, presumably when he had a little bit or a little bit too much of his point there. Social services don't turn up on his doorstep, but here he is getting involved in the Brain family case. So quite remarkable, something very special about the Dochertys. And at this point, we better bring in this man, because Gordon Jeyes is somebody that you've been having a good look at. And this man is now very big in the Irish social worker scene. And he's caught a few people's attention by attacking judges, because he says those nasty judges are not actually bothering to read social workers' submissions, and indeed they're not supporting social workers. So before I hand back to you, just give people a little bit about this man. He was UK's first Director of Children's Services. He was chair of the Anti-Bullying Network. He's been part of the SEED Review Group on Youth Crime, National Youth Justice Strategy Steering Group, Critical Incident Response Dunblane. That's a very interesting one, Mike. I just caught my eye. And of course, he's Royal Society of the Arts. And if you're going to be involved in children, apparently you also need to be a cultural person and involved with the arts. So what is it about this man, David? He suddenly popped up everywhere, England, Scotland and Ireland.
He has a very interesting CV. This is one of the, as the Docherty investigation, which is our open source investigation, has been progressing, we've had a lot of people sending in information. Everything we've got so far has entirely substantiated the information that has been provided directly by the Dochertys. We've had no information at all that is conflicted with their accounts of events. We've had some things such as the relationship to the former police officer that has added to what the Dochertys knew, but we've had no conflicts. We've also had several people of interest that have kind of come out of this investigation. One of them very much is Gordon Jeyes. He's got an interesting CV, to put it mildly, and he was the person ultimately responsible for the social workers that seized the Docherty children. So he, and that, remember, they cleared an entire department of 29 social workers for an entire weekend just to deal with the Docherty family. So that's the decision which will be made at the highest level. That means Gordon Jeyes personally. So hence we're keen to gather any information we can on Mr. Jeyes and his background. It's a very interesting background.
Couldn't agree more. Let's just give people a taster of what we're talking about here. So here's some articles. This one is talking about the massive setup in Ireland that he's now chief executive for. I think that is correct, chief executive.
He was until May. He's just resigned. He's just stepped down.
Just stepped down, okay. Well, vast organisation, 4,000 staff and a budget of 609 million euros. We just see money poured into child protection. There's a slight typo there, apologies to that, but part of this article says, for too long, our flawed approach treated the Child and Family Services like an adjunct of another agency, as an afterthought, but not anymore. And what that is getting at is the fact they're saying we're now setting up this massive organisation which is going to wrap around families and every single child in Ireland. Here's the man's part of the man's CV. You can obviously find this yourself online, but he's been involved in everything. So he starts off in Cambridge, and then all of a sudden this man has become the guru of child protection. But what we don't see happening in England, Wales, Scotland, and indeed Ireland is any improvement in child welfare. And we've got to say, if we're now taking children away from innocent families, what's the real objective? He's been involved in Dunblane. That probably brings us into some controversy there. And you kindly
mentioned in the Cullen report. There's actually two references to him in the Cullen report. He was head of education in Stirling Council, so he was ultimately responsible for the Dunblane Primary School at the time of the massacre, and he gave evidence at the Cullen inquiry into the Dunblane massacre, and he's mentioned twice in the Cullen report. They were very unimpressed with him. They were surprised that he was unable to say whether the 1974 Health and Safety at Work Act actually applied to schools, and they were surprised at his vagueness regarding risk assessment in schools. So they were by no means complimentary to him over his evidence to the inquiry. But he went from there to Cambridgeshire to run what is euphemistically called children's services in Cambridgeshire, and he again hit the headlines. In fact, he hit the headlines in a very big way because he ended up in Panorama, and this was the case that after 5 or 6 years of fighting, the family finally got permission to tell their story, and this is the case that has started to unlock the secret family courts in England, and started to bring some scrutiny into these proceedings, and again, Gordon Jeyes was the man responsible. He was the man. He goes on Panorama and he says sometimes social workers have to think the unthinkable. Now, this was a case where a loving family, had gone along with their baby son because they were concerned that he was injured in some way or not well in some way, and they kept going back to the medical profession saying, no, there's definitely something wrong with our child, and eventually they found that the child had a broken leg. And of course, rather than saying, well, we're very glad that you persisted and we've finally noticed this and let's get to the bottom of it, no, that's not what happened. The family was arrested. They were charged with harming their son, which was nonsense, and they were put through years of hell. And who was it? It was Gordon Jeyes and Gordon Jeyes' department that did this. They were eventually proven to be wrong, and then many years later, after a great deal of fighting, this information came out.
David, you've got some really fascinating information here, which we're having a little bit of a look at the clock, but take us into this a bit, because in following through the Docherty case, you're now looking at this extraordinary transformation, I'm using that term deliberately, transformation of children's services, where you can see the state starting to move in. There's an undertow of, it isn't going to be parents that bring up their children, it's going to be the state. The state is simply going to take the child. This is very, very dark and sinister stuff. Most of it is given a glossy coverage. If I just run through a couple of these images and then I'll pass it back to you. So you've got the Herald in Scotland here saying John Swinney stunned by levels of bureaucracy facing teachers. Now we've got the word there, Transforming Children's Services Conference, and we've got John Swinney MSP here. We've got this lady, Louise Morpeth, she was also involved, and I'm fascinated by this one because of course she's come from the Dartington Social Research Centre, which is down the road from Plymouth in Devon, and a lot of people very interested in the strange group of people there who have suddenly become experts in the care of children. What are you seeing going on in this sort of conference discussing the transformation of children's services?
Yes, this was a very interesting conference in a dull sort of way. The speakers were by no means interesting in their own rights, but they put the information up on YouTube, and the content is fascinating. The background to this is GERFEC, getting it right for every child, named person, state surveillance of family life. But there are other agendas which are driving this forward. One of which is they realise that the welfare state model that they've been working on since the Second World War is bust. It's stacking up more and more failure. It's stacking up more and more cost. It cannot be afforded, and it will fail. And they're casting around for something to do to replace it, because if that goes, with it will go their power. They're bringing in these private sector bodies who are feeding off the state, like Dartington. They're bringing in the tax-exempt foundations and the charitable sector to create this new model. Now, this next slide here we put in for a bit of light relief, because the Dartington people and the assorted organisations carrying out surveys of children in Scotland, and the lady from Dartington was boasting that she had records of 46,000 children in Scotland. 46,000. That's how much data they have gathered. It didn't always go well, though, because this other slide shows the people gathering information, going door to door in the town of Saltcoats, were in fact chased out of the housing estate. The people found it to be a very creepy operation. They thought they might be some sort of paedophile organisation, and they literally ran them out of town. So that was one of the low points in the data gathering exercise. So they're gathering all this information and they're using it to create change. But that leaves the other question. We understand where a lot of the ideas come from, where the confession of faith is, if you like. But the other thing you've got to follow is you've got to follow the money. Now, this next slide shows where some of the money is coming from. This is Kenneth Ferguson. Now, he's a director of the Robertson Trust. Now, they are a tax-exempt foundation, a philanthropic organisation set up by three sisters called Robertson in the 19th century, and they were frugal Scots, and they'd saved their money, and they had they left it to a foundation to benefit children and to engage in charitable giving. A very positive and very 19th century thing to do. So he's involved in funding various projects, and this next pie chart here shows the sort of level of funding, right? So they are putting out about 15-16 million pounds a year they are giving away, which might seem like a lot of money, but remember, Perth and Kinross Council is a small council. It runs about 250 million pounds a year, and the UK as a whole is 750 billion government expenditure a year. So this is, in the greater scheme of things, chump change. It's a very small amount. So they're looking at wanting to transform how our children are raised, how our children are educated, and with it transform society, because it's all about re-engineering society to make us less costly, less likely to use the National Health Service, not claim benefits, and basically make the whole thing affordable. They want you to do as you're told, and they want you to be a good, obedient taxpayer and make the state work all the better. So how does a small organisation like this generate enough money to create this sort of change? And they were talking to various people about this, and they were told, well, there's only one way. There's only one way that you can possibly generate the sort of money you're talking about, and that is debt. So what they have done is they've gone to have a wee chat with the chairman of the Royal Bank of Scotland. And the chairman of the Royal Bank of Scotland said, well, what can I do for you? What are your ambitions here? And the head of the Robertson Trust said, well, I'm looking to set up this fund. We want to get the Royal Bank to fund it, and we're going to lend money to organisations which are going to create change in children's services. How much money are we looking for? Well, we'll start off with 5 million and we'll maybe work up to 100 million. Oh no, says the chairman of the Bank of Scotland. Far too small. For changing these sort of services, you need 500 million to £1 billion. That's the level that you need to be thinking at. So that's the level they're thinking at. So they've gone away and they've worked this up into a scheme. This scheme involves the philanthropic sector putting in some money on a soft loan basis. It involves the Royal Bank of Scotland and other major banks putting in vast sums on a commercial loan basis, but commercial loan to government, so it's a low interest rate. And that fund will then be used to fund the change from having a system that reacts to need to one that is proactive and reacts before the need is present, that reacts to change the people so that they will not need the services. That's the agenda. And the money is coming from the banking system. It's going to be put on the local government balance sheet. It will not show up as part of the central government national debt. It will be used to create this change, and it will be ultimately carried by local taxpayers, but off the books.
David, as you were talking through that, what is in my head is we need a full session on this. What are we doing? We're bringing bankers, international bankers who we already know are running corrupt, criminal, fraudulent banks involved in money laundering, drug dealing. We are bringing those people right in alongside the so-called care of our children. It is obvious what is going on here, being done by stealth by the very governments that we think are there to protect our children. I just got a brief sort of mental image. If you go walking in the wilds on the west coast of America, you are warned that you should keep very young children in the middle of the walking party because the mountain lions have a habit of picking off stragglers at the rear of a group. And that's real. You can check that out yourself. And it seems to me what we've got here is a very dark and vicious global commercial sector, which is now simply saying, well, let's not bother with the politics of nation states. Let's get straight in there and farm the children because it will make our job much easier. And
we wondered when we first came across the technical underpinning of this in the lectures by Sir Harry Burns, former Chief Medical Officer in Scotland, why the slides had the logo of the World Bank on them. Well, we know now. We're talking about international banking, we're talking about tax-exempt foundations, and we're talking about changing the way our children are treated by the state. And none of it involves national parliaments, none of it involves public discussion, none of it involves transparency, none of it involves asking the parents.
David,
just one thing before we leave as well.
Okay.
It'd be worth just noting what it's called. It's called social bridging finance. That's the name they've given it, social bridging finance. The concept here is it's like a bridging loan. You've got one house, it's an old leaky house, it's falling down, it's called the welfare state. It's going to go. You need to move to a nice new shiny house. Right, but you can't be homeless in between times. So you need bridging finance, and that's what it's called.
Okay, thank you very much for that excellent analysis. We're going to be staying on the case. I'm just going to say to our audience and listeners that this is really the heart of the battle. Can we do something about the tension which is ramping up in the South China Seas? No, we can't. Can we do something about tension in other parts of the world? Can we sort out the violence on the French streets or their dictatorship? No, we can't. We need to fight the known threat right in front of our very eyes. And what we're actually witnessing is criminal elites in our respective parliaments that are now showing their hand. It's up to all of us to put a stop to it. I'll just say, if you like what we're doing, please consider taking out a subscription or donating. We need your financial support to continue doing what we're doing. And virtually every time more information comes in from a case, we'll call it a case, those people do not have the money to travel. They've often not got the money to run telephones or to communicate in the normal way. So we can only do what we do with your financial assistance. If you're not on one of the basic subscription levels, perhaps you consider doing that. And certainly if you're one of the many people who are non-paying subscribers with us, we're going to ask very gently, please consider moving across to one of the basic subscriptions, because far from struggling to survive, we need to expand if we're to help you fight what is happening in the United Kingdom today. David, thanks very much for joining us, and we will be back at the same time Monday. Bye-bye.